The summer sun in Ashford County had always carried a weight to it, but that particular afternoon it seemed to press against the skin like a punishment. The Sheriff's Department's annual barbecue was in full swing on Sheriff Raymond Ray Kavanaugh's sprawling private ranch, a 20-acre slice of southern North Carolina. He'd turned into a symbol of his authority. For over 15 years, this event had been part celebration, part political theater. Deputies, their spouses, even city council members came with rehearsed smiles and polished boots, because when Sheriff Kavanaugh threw a party, attendance was never optional. Beneath the towering oaks, families gathered around picnic tables. Kids darted between coolers and grills, and the smell of slow-cooked ribs hung thick in the air. Ray moved through the crowd like a politician, and a monarch rolled into one. His silver hair shimmered beneath the harsh sunlight, and the creases of his face seemed carved from the land itself. At 58, Ray didn't command respect, he expected it. At 63, his presence loomed without trying, his crisp uniform worn even on a day off, as though authority clung to him like a second skin. "Stand up straight," one deputy muttered under his breath to his wife when Ray neared their table. The woman fixed her posture instantly. Ray didn't miss the comment. He never did. But he said nothing, just smiled, that closed lip smile that never quite reached his eyes. Across the lawn, Deputy Brian Turner manned the grill, cracking jokes, flipping ribs, and looking every bit the ideal young officer. At 30, Brian had gained quiet admiration in the department for being reliable, honest, and most dangerously ambitious. Ray had taken him under his wing, which in Ashford was code for this one: "I'll keep close." But it wasn't Brian who caught Ray's eye that afternoon. It was Julia Turner. She stood by the drinks table in a pale blue sundress that fluttered gently in the wind. Her chestnut hair was pulled into a lazy ponytail. No makeup, no pretense, just natural beauty, the kind that didn't try and never had to. At 28, she was a third-grade teacher at Ashford Elementary, with soft smiles and a voice that made even rowdy kids lean in. Ray noticed her, of course. Ray noticed everything in his county. But today, something had shifted. It wasn't just her presence that struck him, it was the way she moved, the way she laughed. He drifted over under the guise of needing a refill. "Mind if I steal some of that lemonade?" Ray asked, flashing a grin. His voice was smooth, practiced. Julia looked up and handed him the drink without hesitation. "Only if you promise not to critique Brian's ribs again," she teased, her tone light, unafraid. Ray chuckled. "Man's got potential. Might even earn a promotion if he doesn't burn the brisket." Her laughter rang out over the barbecue, light and clear. Something in it made Ray's jaw tighten. She wasn't nervous around him. She wasn't performing like the others. She was just herself. He leaned against the table, casual but calculated. "Must be tough," he said, nodding toward Brian. "Being married to a man who's always chasing danger." Julia's smile wavered, but only slightly. "It has its challenges, but I'm proud of him." Ray's eyes scanned her face, then dipped lower, pausing with a boldness that should have made her step away. Instead, she held his gaze. Brian appeared moments later, throwing an arm around her waist. "Sheriff," he greeted warmly. Ray shifted instantly, smile intact. "Your man here's got a steady hand at the range. Hit all his marks last Thursday." It was a lie. Brian had missed too, but the satisfaction on Julia's face when she heard it made the lie worth telling. Brian nodded, surprised but pleased. "Appreciate that, sir." "How long you two been hitched now?" Ray asked, voice light, but his eyes like scalpels. 4 years last month," Julia answered. "Ah, young love," Ray said with a faint smirk. "Still fresh, still full of hope." His tone held something darker beneath the surface, an insinuation Julia couldn't quite name. The way he looked at her then made her skin prickle. It was admiration, but it wasn't the innocent kind. She narrowed her eyes just slightly. "You ever miss it, being young and full of hope?" Ray smirked. "Depends. Some things get better with age." She tilted her head. "Like wine." "Like people," he said, his eyes locked on hers. Without meaning to, Julia laughed again. "You're kind of a silver fox, Sheriff." The words slipped out before she could stop them. They hung between them like smoke. Brian laughed, easing the tension. Ray's smile stayed a beat too long. "Careful now. That tongue of yours could get you in trouble." Then he walked away, leaving her flushed and strangely breathless. As Julia turned to Brian and tried to anchor herself back into the reality of their life, the modest home, the student loans, the grocery store budgets, a strange flutter stirred in her chest. She dismissed it as nothing, a passing moment, a powerful man throwing out a line he wouldn't dare reel in. But 3 days later, the text came. That sundress looked real nice on you, R. Julia stared at the message for a long time. She knew what she should do, ignore it, delete it, tell her husband. But instead, she responded, just to thank you. Just enough. Ray replied almost instantly, you can call me Ray. She set the phone down. Outside, the wind shifted. Inside, something had already begun. The first time Julia Turner responded to Sheriff Ray Kavanaugh's text, she told herself it meant nothing. A harmless acknowledgement. A simple thank you to the man who technically signed her husband's paycheck. But when she picked up her phone the next morning, there was another message waiting. Ray, hope your day's off to a good start. Let me know if Brian's still burning toast. I'll write him up myself. It was clever, casual, harmless. She smiled in spite of herself, typed back a laughing emoji, and slid her phone away before Brian could walk back into the kitchen. She told herself again it was nothing. But nothing quickly became everything. By the end of that week, Ray was texting her daily. At first, it was department-related. He'd ask if Brian was free for an extra shift, or whether Julia would be attending the upcoming department fundraiser. Then came the personal messages, ones that made her pause. Ray, you always seem to understand what other people miss. Ray, bet your students adore you. Can't say I blame them. One night when Brian was working late, Ray messaged, you know, the hardest part of this job, it's wanting someone to really see you, and only one person ever has. Julia stared at the screen for a full minute. Her heart was beating too fast. Her hands were sweating. And yet she replied, Julia who? The reply came fast. Ray, you. That single word echoed in her mind long after she deleted the thread. Because yes, she deleted everything. Every night before Brian came home, she'd clean out the messages with the same guilty precision she used to grade spelling tests. Swipe, delete, pretend. But every morning she woke up wondering if there would be a new one. And there always was. It was like stepping into a secret garden, a hidden place where she wasn't just Mrs. Turner or the sweet young teacher or Brian's wife. In Ray's world, she was desired, respected, seen. And whether she admitted it or not, she was addicted to that feeling. 2 weeks after the barbecue, Ray suggested they grab coffee. Not just to talk, he had a surprise he wanted to plan for Brian's upcoming birthday. An anniversary dinner he claimed, maybe even a promotion if Julia could help keep it under wraps. It sounded thoughtful, generous, almost fatherly. So why did it make her heart race? They met just off the highway in Burlington at a nondescript diner where no one from Ashford ever went. Ray was already there when she arrived, not in his uniform, but in jeans and a navy button-down shirt. He stood as she entered, pulled out her chair like a gentleman. When their hands brushed, she didn't flinch. I appreciate you coming, he said smoothly, his eyes crinkling like this was perfectly normal. Brian's lucky. Not every deputy has a wife who'd help plan a surprise. Julia smiled. You're being very generous. Ray held her gaze for a moment. You deserve more than you've been given. The air between them thickened. She tried to respond, but nothing came. He shifted the conversation back to work, then to wine, then to her. When she asked how he knew so much about her taste in books and flowers, he simply smiled. I noticed things. That lunch led to a second one, and the second led to a motel room. Room 114, Starview Motel, Tuesday. She told Brian she had a teacher's conference in Chapel Hill. She wore a gray skirt and a modest blouse, but nothing could hide the trembling in her hands as she knocked on the door. Twice, then a third time. The prearranged signal. Ray opened the door without a word. The room was dim, the motel decor replaced with a personal touch. He'd taken down the hideous art and set a small bouquet of red roses on the dresser. A bottle of champagne chilled in a bucket. It should have felt wrong. It should have triggered every self-preserving instinct she had, but it didn't. He didn't touch her right away. He poured her a drink, asked about her students, and made her laugh. He made her feel like the center of the world. And when he finally reached for her waist, when he finally kissed her, it wasn't rushed or violent, it was reverent. It was like she was something sacred. When they finished, he handed her a small blue box. Inside was a delicate white gold bracelet with a teardrop sapphire. Ray, this is too much. He smiled. You deserve beautiful things, Julia. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. She wore it for an hour, then took it off before going home, tucking it deep into her purse. Later, she'd hide it inside a shoebox at the back of the closet, where it would stay next to cards, receipts, and scraps of memory, too dangerous to leave in the open. When Brian got home that night, he kissed her cheek tired from patrol and told her about helping a teenager jumpstart her car. It was a simple story, so ordinary it almost broke her. Their house suddenly felt too small, their life too plain. His goodness, his steady, sincere goodness, began to feel like a burden she could no longer carry without shame. But the worst part, she still went back. Twice a month she found new reasons to be gone. Staff meetings, classroom seminars, curriculum workshops, lies rehearsed and perfected. And Ray was insatiable. Not just in bed, but in attention and control. He messaged constantly even during school hours. He wanted photos. He asked what she was wearing. He demanded to know who she was with, and she gave it to him. Sometimes reluctantly, sometimes willingly. And every time she deleted the messages, wiping away the evidence of her betrayal like it was just another chore. Back at the department, Ray turned his attention to Brian, but not in a way anyone would notice at first. He praised Brian publicly, called him a real asset, but then scheduled him for night shifts, holiday patrols, and solo beat runs. He told others that Brian had potential, but then questioned his judgment behind closed doors. Deputies began to pull away. Conversation stopped when Brian entered the room. Patrol partners were reassigned without explanation, and slowly Brian Turner, the department's golden boy, became a shadow of who he had been. Julia noticed. Of course she did. She asked about it once. Just politics, Brian replied, forcing a smile. Sheriff's a hard man to read. She said nothing. What could she say? That she had helped orchestrate the slow dismantling of the man she once swore to love. Even her friends noticed something had changed. You okay, Jules? Her coworker Sarah asked one afternoon. You've been kind of distracted. Julia smiled too quickly. Just lesson planning. Third graders are wild this semester. But Sarah's eyes lingered on the new earrings. The new shoes. The phone that buzzed constantly. The lies multiplied like cancer cells, and every one of them needed 3 more to cover it up. She stopped calling her mother. Avoided happy hour. She couldn't risk someone hearing the change in her voice, the guilt, the hunger, the fear. And still she told herself, I'm in control. But she wasn't. Because Ray wasn't just playing a game. He was building a trap. And she had already stepped inside. Julia thought she understood the rules. She had drawn a line in her mind, invisible but firm. She could meet him. She could lie. She could even sleep with him. But only if she chose when, where, how. In her version of the story, she was still in control. But control was the illusion Ray Kavanaugh used best. At the Starview Motel Room 114, they met every second Tuesday like clockwork. Ray always arrived early, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with new jewelry, never the same stone twice. Sometimes just with wine and words that wrapped around Julia like velvet. He said things no one else had ever said to her. You see me, Julia, he whispered into her hair. Not the badge, not the legend, me. She wanted to believe it. Maybe part of her did. But something shifted on the Tuesday when he arrived with a half-empty bottle of whiskey in one hand and a trembling fury in the other. He didn't knock. He barged in. Julia was still smoothing her skirt when he grabbed her wrist, not gently, not with the reverence of previous weeks, but like she was something he owned. His silver hair was unkempt. His eyes were dark, glassy. Who the hell is Daniel, he hissed. Who? Waha. The guy from your staff meeting. You said his name twice in one message last week. Julia blinked. Ray, he's a math teacher. He has a lisp and wears socks with sandals. Ray didn't laugh. He demanded her phone, and she handed it over. Not because she was guilty, but because she was scared. He scrolled with shaky fingers, breathing hard. When he didn't find anything, he slammed the phone on the nightstand, cracking its corner. The silence that followed was worse than yelling. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring ahead. I can't lose you, he muttered. You don't know what you've done to me. Ray, she whispered gently now, sitting beside him. I'm here. Aren't I? He nodded slowly. Then he turned and kissed her hands, the same one he'd just bruised. He made love to her that night, as if he was apologizing without words. He was gentle, almost worshipful, and afterward he held her so tightly she could barely breathe. Julia told herself it was just stress, that this man, powerful as he was, had demons he didn't know how to tame, that she was the one person who could soothe him. But deep down she knew, that line in the sand, it had already been erased. The next week she tried to pull back. She canceled their meeting, claiming she had the flu. For a full hour her phone stayed quiet, and then the storm hit. 37 texts in 4 hours. Where are you? Are you okay? Did you lie to me? I saw your car outside school. You didn't look sick. Why are you doing this? "Don't test me, Julia." Then came the knock. Not at her door, but at her husband's office. Ray called Brian in for a performance review. Brian came home pale and confused, saying the sheriff had concerns about his field reports. Nothing official, just whispers. Julia's blood ran cold. That night, another message from Ray. "Hope your husband's doing okay. Tough conversation today. Would hate to see his career affected by poor choices." The message wasn't just a threat, it was ownership. She texted him back immediately, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please don't punish Brian." His reply came instantly tomorrow. 3 p.m., same room. She stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror afterward. Her skin was pale, her eyes unfamiliar. The girl she used to be the one who fell in love with Brian over burned coffee and shared lesson plans was nowhere in sight. She looked like a ghost. She felt like one. Ray's grip tightened with each passing week. He stopped pretending their affair was hidden. One afternoon, he parked his black SUV in front of her school. Just sat there for 15 minutes, staring through the windshield. Julia panicked. Ran to her car with trembling hands peeled out of the parking lot. Later that night, he texted, "That green cardigan doesn't suit you. I like the navy one better." She hadn't worn the navy one in weeks. She began checking windows twice before bed, locking doors 3 times, sleeping with a kitchen knife under her pillow when Brian worked late shifts. She changed her phone number. Ray got the new one within 48 hours. When she started avoiding him, Ray appeared at her grocery store. His voice behind her in the bread aisle made her drop a jar of pasta sauce. "You cook Italian now," he murmured, eyes scanning her cart. "That's new." The clerk later found Julia in the bathroom, shaking so violently she couldn't speak. At work, Brian deteriorated under the weight of invisible sabotage. Ray's strategy was surgical, subtle humiliations wrapped in faux praise. "You're a real trooper, Turner. Traffic detail during the parade takes stamina. Inventory duty again, that's dedication. Let's keep you on night patrol. Your wife can't miss you if she's asleep, right?" Brian didn't understand it. He only felt the pressure, the slow drowning. And Julia, she watched the man she once loved become a ghost in their home. He stopped laughing, stopped sharing. He slept on the couch or sometimes not at all. The joy that once filled their kitchen had turned to ash. Still, Julia clung to the illusion that she could control this, that she could keep Ray satisfied just enough to protect Brian, that she could manage 2 worlds without letting them collapse. But Ray's obsession was no longer about love or even lust. It was about possession, and he had no intention of letting go. Julia's plan had been simple: meet Ray one last time in public, end things face to face, in a coffee shop or somewhere she could say no without risking what came next. She had even drafted the message 7 times. Each version tried to sound firm but not provoking, honest but not dangerous. But none of them ever left her phone. Because deep down, Julia knew no text would be enough. Not for Ray. And then he beat her to the punch. Thursday morning, Ray called Brian into his office. "A special surveillance assignment," he said. "Overnight detail. Solo. A supposedly urgent matter, an empty warehouse in Chapel Hill with suspected activity. No backup, no radio chatter. Just hours of darkness and silence." Brian accepted without question. And Ray texted Julia minutes later, "I'll be at your place tonight. We have more to discuss about Charlotte." Charlotte, the condo, the fantasy future he'd built in his mind. Julia panicked. "Brian might come home early," she replied. "Please don't do this." No response. She considered staying at Sarah's house, calling in sick, driving to her parents' 2 towns over. But every option led to one conclusion: this wouldn't end until Ray wanted it to. That night at 6:30 p.m., his black SUV pulled up her driveway like a hearse arriving early. She met him at the door, stepping outside before he could even knock. "We're not doing this. Not here." But Ray only smiled and brushed past her like he belonged there. "Don't worry about Brian," he said. "He's 42 miles away watching shadows in a warehouse. I sent him there myself." He set a bottle of expensive red wine on the kitchen counter. His confidence oozed from every step. He was a man certain of the outcome, not even pretending to ask for permission anymore. "Ray, stop," Julia said. "We need to talk." "We are talking." He poured himself a glass. "You should go pack. I've got the overnight bag in my truck. We can be in Charlotte before midnight." Her chest tightened. "You're not serious." "I'm completely serious." His voice dropped. "I pulled strings at the Charlotte PD. You'll teach in the city. I'll work district command. New IDs, new life. Divorce papers arrive for Brian next Tuesday." "No," and her voice cracked. He looked up slowly. "Excuse me." "I said no." She stepped back, heart pounding. You can't just decide my life. This isn't a movie, Ray. His smile vanished. He closed the distance between them in 3 slow steps. His voice turned sharp cold. You think you're in control after everything I've done, after what I've given up for you. He grabbed her wrist again, the same spot as last time, his grip like iron. Julia's phone sat on the kitchen counter just 2 feet away. She reached for it. He slammed it away. I protected you, he hissed. From this town, from what they'd say, you owe me. I owe you nothing, she snapped. Ray's eyes darkened. Don't make me prove how wrong you are. Accidents happen, Julia. You know that. I've covered them for years. Her blood ran cold. Brian, she whispered. Ray leaned in close. I've buried bigger men than your husband and never got a question. You think they'll believe him over me, I write the damn reports. And then the shift. His body froze. He turned toward the hallway. Because he'd heard it. Footsteps. Not imaginary, not part of his plan. Brian Turner stood in the doorway. Still in uniform. Still wearing the badge that Ray had pinned on his chest 2 years ago. He said nothing. He didn't need to. Julia saw it in his eyes, the collapse of everything. The marriage, the trust, the illusions. Ray dropped her wrist slowly, backed 1 step away. 10 seconds passed. No one spoke. Brian's eyes locked with Julia's, then Ray's. And without a word, he turned and walked out. Not a sprint, not an explosion. Just cold, precise movement. Out the hallway, through the front door, into the night. Julia chased after him, screaming his name. But by the time she reached the driveway, the patrol car had disappeared into the darkness. The next 48 hours passed like a fever dream. Brian didn't come home. He didn't answer texts. Julia left 27 voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. When she called the station, the desk sergeant said simply, Deputy Turner requested personal leave. That's all we know. And when he did come home late Saturday night, he moved through their home like a stranger. No eye contact. No words. He packed a duffel bag. He took his toothbrush, his shaving kit. When she tried to explain when she said Ray manipulated me, it wasn't love. It was control. He didn't even blink. He didn't sleep in their bed after that. He took the couch, or stayed at the station. Whatever they had before was gone. Ray, meanwhile, went public. He began appearing outside her classroom. Sometimes just his truck in the parking lot. Sometimes him standing at the chain-link fence, smiling like he belonged there. Julia changed her phone number again. 2 days later, a bouquet of lilies arrived at school. No note. But the stems were tied with a blue ribbon, the same shade as the sapphire bracelet in her closet. She started checking for signs that he'd been inside the house. Once the silverware drawer was rearranged. Another time, her dresser left slightly open, her perfumes misaligned. Nothing taken. Just moved. Violated. When she brought it up via text, Ray replied, Love the scent of the vanilla one. It stays on your skin all day. Julia began sleeping with a chair wedged under her bedroom doorknob. She jumped at the sound of wind. She stopped driving the same route home twice in a row. Brian noticed, of course he did, but he said nothing. Maybe he thought she deserved it. Maybe he didn't have anything left to say. And that was the moment Julia finally realized. Ray wasn't going to stop. Not until she was ruined. Not until Brian was erased. And not until the word no longer existed between them. The night everything broke didn't end with a fight. It ended with a silence so final it felt like grief. In a town like Ashford, silence wasn't passive, it was deliberate. It wore uniforms and church clothes. It smiled through clenched teeth and carried casseroles to funerals. And when it saw something wrong, it turned its gaze elsewhere, especially if the man at the center of it wore a star-shaped badge with 5 decades of dirt behind it. Deputy Brian Turner knew this better than most. It started small. A reassignment to direct traffic at the town's annual Founders Parade, a job usually given to first-year cadets. Then came the shift changes, overnights, weekends, triple coverage for events where nothing ever happened. Tasks that left him alone, invisible, and constantly exhausted. But Brian didn't complain. He never raised his voice, never asked why. Instead, he showed up 10 minutes early, saluted the desk sergeant, and did the job. Sheriff Ray Kavanaugh watched with interest, because this was a test not of skill, but of endurance, and Brian, to Ray's disappointment, refused to break. So Ray escalated. One week, Brian found himself assigned to equipment inventory in the moldy basement of the old department annex, cataloging expired riot gear and broken radios. Another week, during a major narcotics raid, he was left off the deployment list. And afterward, at the team debriefing, Ray publicly criticized him for lack of engagement. It didn't matter that Brian hadn't been invited. The damage was done. Whispers began circulating. He's not the same lately. Maybe he's cracking under pressure. You think there's something going on with his wife? People who used to eat lunch with Brian no longer made eye contact. Deputies who once had his back now muttered excuses and shifted blame. The department was fracturing, dividing silently between those who feared Ray and those who owed him. Only a few still made quiet gestures of solidarity. Rodriguez, an old patrol buddy, once stayed an extra hour to correct a paperwork error Ray had engineered. Tenners, a rookie with too much idealism, offered to cover a midnight shift when Brian's eyes looked hollow enough to collapse. But even they knew helping Brian was dangerous. Ray had eyes everywhere. Back home, Julia lived in a different kind of hell. Ray's obsession no longer lingered in shadows. It had become ritual. He parked outside their house at night, headlights off, engine idling. She'd find gifts left on the porch. Her favorite takeout, a new scarf, a framed photo of a lake she mentioned liking once in passing. When she blocked his number, the text resumed from a new one the next day. When she changed her email, he sent a letter to the school signed anonymously, but referencing the color of her dress the day before. She began checking the locks 3 times each night. Once she returned home and knew immediately someone had been inside. Nothing stolen, but the towels were folded differently. Her bedroom lamp turned a few inches to the right, her toothbrush dry when it should have been wet. Ray never admitted to any of it. He didn't need to. Later that evening, she received a message that confirmed what she feared. That new lavender lotion's a nice touch. Smells like spring. It was on her nightstand drawer, hidden inside. He had opened it. She stopped sleeping. She stopped eating. She started leaving the TV on all night just to fill the silence that had become suffocating. Brian noticed the changes, but he said nothing. The man she once loved now existed like a ghost inside the house, present but unreachable. He came and went with military efficiency, never looking her in the eyes, never acknowledging the fear that clung to her like a second skin. And Julia, she felt like a puppet trapped between a man who wouldn't let go and another who had already let go completely. 3 weeks after Brian discovered the affair, Julia made her first move to escape. She drove 60 miles to the regional Texas Rangers office. She didn't use her name at the front desk. She asked to speak to someone privately. Then in a locked room with a female officer named Reynolds, she told the story, all of it. She brought printouts of Ray's texts, photos of the gifts, evidence of his surveillance, the bruises, the bracelet, the threats. Reynolds listened quietly, took notes. "We'll look into this," she said softly. "You did the right thing, Julia." For the first time in weeks, Julia exhaled. She cried in the car afterward, tears of relief, fear, exhaustion. But 2 hours later, her phone rang. Blocked number. She hesitated, then answered. Ray's voice came through slow and satisfied. "Hope the drive wasn't too long. That coffee they serve there's garbage, huh?" He proceeded to recite her entire conversation with Ranger Reynolds. Word for word, even her body language. "You shouldn't waste their time," he said finally. "They don't work for you. They work for me." Click. The line went dead. Julia sat frozen behind the wheel, her mouth open but unable to scream. The next day, she called the Ranger's office. No one answered. She tried again, then emailed. Her report had been erased. Her file gone from the system. Ray had reached even that high. Julia broke, not in a dramatic collapse, not in a scream or a public meltdown. She broke the way women like her did, quietly. She stopped brushing her hair some mornings. She forgot to pack lunch for school. She didn't answer Sarah's texts anymore. She avoided mirrors, until the day it all changed. It happened during lunch break in the teacher's lounge. A substitute teacher, older, gray-haired, sat across from Julia sipping tea. "Oh, Ashford," she said. "I worked at the high school here once, years ago." Julia looked up, interested. Had this young English teacher, bright, full of ideas. She left mid-semester. Mental breakdown. Rumors said she had something going with the sheriff. The words hit like a slap. Julia stared. "What happened to her?" she asked. The sub shrugged. "Disappeared. Heard she moved to Alabama. Some say she tried to report him. Next thing you know, her marriage is over and no one in town speaks her name." That night, Julia stayed up until 3 a.m. Researching, digging, connecting dots. She made a burner social media account, contacted former department employees, clerks, dispatchers. She searched newspaper archives, court records, old high school yearbooks. Every stone she overturned revealed the same pattern. Ray Kavanaugh had done this before. To a paralegal in 2012, a city clerk in 2015, a deputy's wife in 2017. The last one chilled her blood. Diana Forrester. Her story was identical to Julia's. Private meetings, expensive gifts, a motel room. Her husband, a deputy, was found dead. Ray called it suicide. No one questioned it. Diana left town within the week. Julia stared at the grainy photo of Diana's face in an archived article. The woman looked like her. Same eyes, same smile, same mistake. And suddenly Julia understood something with horrifying clarity. This would never end. Ray would ruin Brian, then ruin her, then choose someone new. Like a king collecting broken queens. Unless she did something no one had ever done before. Unless she ended him first. By the time the idea took root in Julia's mind, it no longer felt like a crime. It felt like necessity, like breathing, like self-preservation. There were no more illusions left to shatter. Ray had ripped those away weeks ago, along with her safety, her marriage, and her identity. What remained was resolve. Cold, precise, lethal. She started where any determined woman would, the internet. Not Google. That would be too obvious. She drove 30 miles to a public library outside Ashford County, used a public terminal, and searched for untraceable poison symptoms similar to stroke natural toxin detection window. She took notes on receipt paper, burned them in the backyard fire pit that same night. Next came Ray's routine. He was obsessive, which made him predictable. Tuesday nights were always free. That was the day he used to visit room 114. Thursday evenings he patrolled town late, showing his face where he needed it seen. Fridays he reserved for off-record time, which usually meant Julia. So she chose Friday. She drafted the message like a playwright composing a final act. I've been thinking. About us. About everything. Brian is gone. Not physically, but emotionally. You were right, I've been fighting what I really want. Dinner Friday night at the house. Let's talk about Charlotte. About our new beginning. The response came within seconds. I knew you'd come around, 7 p.m. Wear the blue one. She smiled coldly. Of course he remembered the blue dress. The one from the first motel meeting. The one he said made her look unreasonably perfect. Good, let him believe this was surrender. Let him walk into this like every woman before her had walked into him. The next 2 days were surgical. She drove to a liquor store outside the county, bought his favorite Cabernet. She retrieved the sapphire bracelet from the shoebox in the closet, not to wear, but to remind herself who she was before. She cleaned the house top to bottom, lit candles, set the table with the crystal wine glasses from their wedding registry still unused. Every piece of cutlery, every fold of the napkin, every detail screamed, I've accepted my fate. And in one of those glasses, she poured half a packet of tasteless, colorless powder, stirring it into the dark red wine until it vanished. She had rehearsed the dosage. Enough to paralyze within 30 minutes. Enough to silence his vocal cords in 40. Enough to stop his heart in less than an hour. She wouldn't need to lift a finger. Just keep pouring, keep smiling. She wrote a letter, addressed it to Brian. A full confession of the affair, of the manipulation, of everything Ray had done. It was Julia's final gift, not revenge, redemption. 7 p.m. The black SUV pulled into the driveway like the devil coming home. Ray stepped out like he was walking into a restaurant reservation. No flowers, no gifts, just entitlement. He rang the doorbell once. Julia opened it with a smile practiced in the mirror. Blue dress, soft curls, bare shoulders, the perfect illusion of surrender. He stepped in, surveyed the room with satisfaction. Smells amazing, he said, unholstering his gun and placing it on the table casually. Always liked your cooking. Reminded me what home's supposed to feel like. She forced a blush. I thought you'd appreciate that. Dinner flowed like a scripted scene. Steak, roasted potatoes, asparagus with lemon butter. His favorite. She poured his wine. He drank. Once, twice, a third time, he started talking about the Charlotte condo. The balcony overlooks the skyline. Gated garage, smart lock system, no nosy neighbors. He leaned in. It'll be ours, Julia. Finally. Just you and me. She refilled his glass, nodded with practiced enthusiasm. By minute 40, his speech began to blur slightly. He loosened his collar, wiped his brow. Warm in here, he mumbled. Maybe a little, she said sweetly, another sip. He obliged. By minute 47, he stood up, wobbled, then clutched the back of his chair. Something's off, he whispered. His eyes blinked slower, his fingers trembled. He reached for his gun, but his body betrayed him. He dropped to one knee, then collapsed. She watched it happen with ice in her veins. She didn't help him. She didn't even flinch. She simply walked around the table, lifted the wine bottle, and set it down gently on the counter, next to the dish towel she had prepared for wiping fingerprints. Ray's mouth moved, but no sound came out. His eyes bulged. He understood now. She had won. And he couldn't even scream. 10:17 p.m. Brian came home early. The captain had noticed how ragged he looked. Told him to take the weekend off. "You're no good to anyone dead on your feet," he'd said. Brian pulled into the driveway, saw Ray's SUV, and felt nothing. Not rage, not surprise, just numb inevitability. Inside, the candles still flickered. 2 place settings, 2 wine glasses, and then silence. He walked toward the kitchen like a man underwater. And there on the tile floor, Ray Kavanaugh. Lifeless, face down. Julia sat beside him. Posture perfect, hands folded, eyes locked on the body. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Brian knelt, felt for a pulse he already knew wouldn't be there. Then silently he returned to the dining room. Picked up the envelope addressed to him. He read it, every word, twice. Then without a word he walked back into the kitchen, wiped down the wine glass bearing Ray's fingerprints, and placed it in Julia's hands, wrapping her fingers around it. Their eyes met. And for the first time in weeks, something passed between them. Not love, not forgiveness, but alliance. 90 minutes later, the Texas Rangers arrived, responding to Brian's 911 call. Found him like this, Brian told them. Came home early. She was in shock. Can't get a word out of her. Julia sat silently. Like a woman traumatized. Like a woman who had been cornered and acted. The evidence told a perfect story. Her fingerprints on the wine glass. His obsession proven by text letters, gifts, prior reports from dismissed women. The whisper network Ray had controlled for years. And now a dead man on her floor? By morning, the theory had solidified. Self-defense. A sheriff who had abused his power for decades. A woman too afraid to speak. A confrontation gone too far, Ashford County murmured. Some believed it, some didn't. But few were willing to say Ray didn't have it coming. Ashford County didn't burn down after Sheriff Ray Kavanaugh's death. It didn't riot. There were no protests, no media vans parked outside the Miller's home, no tabloid headlines screaming scandal. No, the town did what small towns do best. It whispered. For weeks after the sheriff's body was carried from Julia's kitchen, the community hovered in a strange purgatory, half shocked, half relieved. Some people nodded solemnly and said he was a good man. Must have been a misunderstanding. Others leaned in closer and whispered, he always had a thing for young wives. This one just fought back. No one said it out loud, but many believed Julia Turner had done what the law never could, ended a reign of fear. The Texas Rangers conducted a full investigation. They found the messages, hundreds of them, detailing Ray's obsession, in his own words, threats, possessive statements, even plans for their new life. Julia's digital footprint was scrubbed clean, her burner searches hidden behind public access terminals. The wine bottle was tested, but the toxin, natural organic, metabolized in under 2 hours, left no trace. What remained was testimony, circumstance, and a story people were ready to believe. Julia had been harassed, stalked, cornered in her own home. And when Ray made one final fatal move, she fought back. Self-defense. No charges filed. Case closed. But the end of the investigation wasn't the end of the damage. Brian Turner resigned from the department 6 months later. Not publicly, not dramatically, just quietly handed in his badge and service weapon, cleared out his locker, and walked out of the building without a word. He didn't say goodbye to anyone. No one asked him to stay. Because by then, everyone knew the story, or thought they did. And no one wanted to look into his eyes and see what was left. The department carried on. A new sheriff was appointed. Policies were changed. Files were audited. A few old cases reopened. But nothing could reverse what Ray had built or destroyed. The Millers sold their house within a month. Packed up in silence. No farewell party. No explanation. Julia wrapped the sapphire bracelet in a linen cloth and buried it in the backyard the night before they left. No gravestone. No marker. Just soil over a secret. They moved north somewhere colder, quieter, nameless. A place where no one knew the sheriff's name. A place where no one would knock on their door and ask what really happened. And in that new place, they began a life that didn't look like life at all. Their marriage didn't end. It mutated. It twisted into something that no longer resembled love or partnership or even forgiveness. There were no kisses, no laughter, no anniversary dinners. What remained between them was something else entirely, an unspoken contract of survival. They shared a roof. They paid bills. They sat on opposite ends of a couch and watched muted television. They didn't talk about Ray. They didn't talk about the motel. They didn't talk about the body on the kitchen floor. And most importantly, they didn't talk about the moment their marriage died. The moment Brian stood in the bedroom doorway and saw it all. That moment never passed. It calcified. It lived between them like a third person in the house. Sometimes Julia would wake in the night and find Brian standing at the window staring out into the darkness. His face blank, his hands motionless, as if he were waiting for something or someone to come back. Other times, Brian would find Julia in the shower long past midnight, curled on the floor with the water running cold steam rising around her like a veil. They didn't touch each other, but they never left either, because they understood something now that no one else did. That some choices once made alter the landscape of possibility forever. They had crossed lines no one could uncross. Small compromises had led to unthinkable consequences. And in the end, what bound them wasn't love. It was complicity, shared guilt, shared silence, and the memory of a man who died with Julia's name on his lips and Brian's shadow in his eyes. Occasionally, a piece of Ashford followed them north. An email from a former colleague. A message from Sarah, hope you're okay. You deserve peace. A news article about the new sheriff and policy reforms. Sometimes Julia would click. Sometimes she'd delete them unread. But one email she kept printed it, in fact. Folded it 3 times and kept it in her desk drawer. It came from Diana Forrester. Subject line I heard. The body of the email was just 2 sentences. I always hoped someone would stop him. I never thought it would be you. Thank you for all of us. Julia read it on quiet nights. When the world didn't make sense. When the silence in the house grew too loud. When the weight of what she had done felt heavier than justice, but lighter than submission. She never replied, because there was nothing to say. And so the story of Sheriff Ray Kavanaugh died the way he did, on a cold floor in silence. There was no plaque, no parade, just 2 people who lived with the truth, each in their own quiet exile. Not punished, not praised, just existing, forever marked by a choice that saved them and cost them everything.